Welcome back, everybody, to the Card Chatter with Refractor Jones and Bobbles and Ball Cards. We are recording this on November 1st, so happy November, everyone. Hope you had a safe and happy Halloween. This will be going up, obviously, Wednesday morning, November 2nd, but just wanted to shout out happy November to everybody. Closing out 2022 really, really quickly, it seems. But anyway, as we always like to start out, want to give a shout out to Mason and Mason's Mission. I'll pop that up on the screen if you're unfamiliar with what it is. It is a nonprofit charity organization that simply Mason Forelli, someone who has battled and fought and whooped cancer's butt, multiple times now. He said, you know what, I want to help other pediatric out that have suffered with the same thing, and he knows the difficulties that other children and families go through. So it's an awesome thing that Mason does, and so we always like to shout out Mason and try to help support Mason's mission. And if you're unable to financially support that, if you just hit that subscribe button, me and Refractor will gladly donate upon your behalf. So, all right. How are you doing, sir? It's middle of the week. I'm sure you're in full flow.
Yep. Another day in the neighborhood.
Another day in the neighborhood. Well, you're out there over in Vegas, so you probably what is it, about 70 out there, and y'all think it's freezing?
Yeah, right. No, the weather's
Yeah, we're
fantastic
here.
here.
It's the wonderful time of year where the leaves start falling everywhere. Stuff starts getting like that rotty, mildewy stuff because of the fall season, and temperature starts changing, and yeah, it becomes a mess. Allergies and colds and illnesses and all that start flaring up. So it's always a battle over here. But we had left off the previous episode with a little sneak peek on what we were going to talk about somewhat in this. And there's some other golden nuggets that we can add to it, obviously. But we had mentioned the BGS interview that Neo did. We don't hear a lot from Beckett, but I thought it would be a good conversation considering, you have a friendship with Dr. James Beckett. You formally helped them in your hobby career. Um, so I just wanted to kind of get your take on a little bit of what was said by the new regime, and did you like which direction do you see that them going?
You know, I watched it. I'm not a poo-poo guy, but there were some things there that were said that kind of kind of told me that they were desperate. And rightfully so. They should be desperate. I mean, because they've pretty much kicked themselves in the teeth here for the last 2+ years, and have done nothing to help themselves. Um, the new guy, this guy's been in place supposedly since before the national, and this is the first that we're actually hearing from him, right? So, granted, yes, he's new and he needs to get acclimated and everything else, but if it was me and I was coming in and I was asked to do that job, I from day one I would be out there and put my face out there to many people, not to one person, to many people, so people understand where I'm coming from, where I perceive the direction of Beckett, in the future, and of course, fall on the sword, and just say, hey, we have screwed up here in the last 2 years, and this is what they're doing. But a lot of what I truly heard there, Bubbles, was that they're grasping and they're trying to basically build up their portfolio to be acquired by somebody else. Because as soon as he said that he was open to do collaborations with like PSA or somebody else, that tells me that you're desperate. And why would PSA or anybody else for that matter want to do anything with them than, besides squish them and acquire them? They're You don't help a company that is already down. If it's prime for acquisition, you make sure you bury that company and buy it as cheap as you can. So, again, there were some good things there, and I truly appreciate, his position, and I truly hope that he is able to do some things there, but it's nothing like the way it used to be there. Not at all. That I truly believe that the company has done enough damage to itself that it's not repairable. It really isn't. That's just my
So,
personal opinion. But what do I know?
so just on my initial like thoughts, and to go into it a little bit on my side, and I watched it. When did that come out? I think it was end of last week or something. So it's been quite, it's been several days.
Right.
But my initial thoughts on it was good seeing someone from Beckett come out and speak on things. It was good that it seemed he was pretty open to answering questions. Uh, I thought it was good that he admitted that they needed to improve and that they have made some mistakes and they recognized some of the faults that have happened. But there was some things that concerned me, and maybe it's just like just the way I was taking it. But he kept mentioning like him personally, which my understanding he was like the chief visionary officer or something like that. But he kept mentioning about how he was an entrepreneur. And I always get this weird vibe from those folks because, as you said, it almost sounded like their goal was maybe to rebrand and become acquired or something like that. But if you notice, like every time he would talk about building a company, then it was being sold. It was being sold. He talked about building a plane company or something and how he sold it. And then he talked about, I guess it was the VP or the CEO or something, and how that guy's like corporate. He even said he's not really a collector or anything like that, but he has a corporate background. Now, there's a flip side to that coin. Like running a business, I appreciate, having people in there that know how to run businesses. But I feel like this industry, like sports cards, I've been struggling all evening over on the Bobbles channel to come up with the proper words, but to do a video over there because this space is different than most corporate spaces in the world. Let's be honest. Like there's so many different levels to it. There's so many different uh, personalities, opinions, preferences, contradictions, so many different little nuances that if you're not in tune with the space itself, like I don't know that a corporate background is going to help you much, and I think you have to have some sort of, you know, touch on the hobby itself to know how to guide the ship when it comes to sports cards and corporate spaces within this hobby. Would you agree there or disagree? Do you think like a corporate man, a suit and tie guy could come in and run the company because they know how to run a company? Or do you think it takes more hobby touch to know how to run something like Beckett grading or Beckett in general within the hobby space?
I, I truly think you have to have that collector's mindset, and it's not necessarily just sports cards. I mean, if you are someone who's entrenched in collectibles themselves, that kind of speaks to the brand itself. But if you're just bringing a corporate background to a company and think that you're going to implement your corporate ways into a collectibles market, I think it's a guaranteed fail there. It's not a it's just not a win. And that's why I've always said that, whether it's Fanatics or or it's Tops or Panini, whoever. They have to have people on staff that are making decisions that are part of the hobby, of the everyday hobby, of the circuit. If they're not, you're not going to reach the people. You need to be able to be in touch with what's going on in the real landscape, and not the where you just presume that this is going to happen, or where if you feed this to people, they're going to accept it. It just doesn't work that way. We don't spend our collectible dollars on how that company decides to put out their product, or to. I mean, the last 2 years we have. I mean, most have. I haven't. I just shifted. I moved it in a different direction, and I just went to buying collections versus me just buying wax and playing with some few wax boxes, and then stacking the rest of the wax. But if you have a corporate mindset, great, keep it in the corporate world. This isn't a corporate world, because we're not talking about life and death here. In a corporate world, you're dealing with tens and thousands of jobs of people's livelihoods. This, you're not. What are you dealing with? 500, 1,500 employees? That's not a real big company, by
Yeah,
any stretch of the means.
I think the biggest thing for me is like obviously you want to know how to run a business, so having corporate background isn't a bad thing, or having like a
No,
business degree, or knowledge on how to run a business.
sure.
But I think you have to like look at it more in this space particularly, because it is, as you said, this is not a necessity of an item. Grading is not even, there's probably thousands of collectors out there that do not grade cards. So
Right.
it's not a lifeblood of the hobby itself. It could go away at any moment. And
Yeah.
if you don't listen to the people in the hobby, if you don't understand the importance of like what your business is offering to people, you might lose full touch of what your business or your brand is even supposed to be bringing to the table. It would be like a car salesman, trying to sell a car that has zero knowledge on anything to do with automobiles. They've never driven a car in their life. They don't even know how to check the oil on a vehicle, but they're trying to sell cars. You know, it kind of would go back on that. You're not going to be very successful. You're not going to be able to recommend anything. You're not going to be able to adjust, adapt, and improve because you don't really know what the hell is going on. So that was one thing that stood out to me, is when he was, and he mentioned that he collected a little bit, but that he was an entrepreneur and how he had built these businesses and this, that, and the other, and sold them, and that the other guy was more, corporate based, and he had no collector knowledge and this and that. And I was just like, I don't know if these are the guys I would want leading the ship in this industry. And trust me, I've said it before. The card collector space is a very weird space. I mean, and I'm not here to crap on PSA right now, but I cannot think of any other industry in the world to where people value, worse customer service, slower turnaround times. Like, think of it this way: if you ordered a pizza and it was the delivery company the pizza company that was going to take longer to deliver your pizza, it cost more, but it tasted the worst, were you going to continue ordering that pizza? No.
Not
Like,
today. Not tomorrow.
everything in this world, we make judgment based off of customer service, price for quality, and then the quality itself and everything. And yet in this space, everything is hype driven and popularity based. It's not about
Mhm.
quality or service. It's hype and value, resale value and that sort of thing. So
Right.
I really think this space, and let's be real, it also should be still considered a hobby, but in a corporate aspect, it's a different animal than, running Amazon or something like that, right? It's like,
Sure.
how did
Yeah.
Amazon become big? Good pricing and, Amazon Prime and offering dang near
That's right.
everything in the world. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
this is a different animal that I don't know that a few corporate guys will be able to tame the beast of. And just to touch on it real quick, and shout out to Gem Rate, but we can throw this in there. They actually dropped 18% on their numbers this month. They only did 52,000. They did 31,000 for sports and miscellaneous, and they did 20,000 for TCG and non-sport. I want to go back to the sports and miscellaneous because they got beat by CSG in sports cards for the month of October. CSG did 36,000. So, you know, that's pretty significant. They were at 63,000 in September and they dipped to 52,000 in October. And, you know, I'm just curious, like, I want to say that all four of these companies can sustain, but when you see Beckett drop from number 2 to kind of the underdog in the matter of what, 2 years? That's pretty alarming. They're being beat by, granted CCG, CSG, they have a name and a reputation, and they actually have Beckett's graders, but, like, they've already been overstepped by them already, and I think that's just due to more the way the company's been ran. They've been vocal, they advertise, they listen to their customers, and I think that knowledge and experience is
Yeah.
helping. I would have to put them as if we're gonna say in 2023, one of the 4 companies falls off, I'm going to have to put them at the top of the Vegas odds.
Yeah. I'm with you. That's why I said that, for what, the last year at least, I have just chirped and chirped and chirped that Beckett has to be acquired because they've done enormous amount of damage to their brand that they're not able to come back from this. I mean, I know this is my world. This is the world I live in. I live in the world of companies being downsized and then I sell them off for pennies on the dollar. When they're coming out there and they're saying that they're willing to go collab with PSA, what are you saying? You're just saying
Okay,
you're desperate.
let me ask that though, because I don't know if you caught this, because I know you had some stuff, that going on, and I can't remember timing of it all. Peter did an interview recently, and this shocked me. But there was a question brought up of what is the likelihood of SGC being acquired by CSG? Because
Mhm.
for the last 2 years, there's been rumors like I remember 2021, the rumor was, I guess it was around the national that PSA was buying SGC, and I laughed at everybody because I actually asked my rep about it. And, and he was like, if there's any talk to this, they're hiding that stuff very well. And, keep in mind, he's like, he's like Peter's right hand man. So I
Mhm.
felt confident in that one. And now the talk has been CSG acquiring SGC. And I'm just like, in the back of my mind, I'm like, that makes the least bit of sense out of any of it because
Yeah.
they used to be CSG. So
Right.
it's like, hey, we didn't want you, but now we want you back. We're gonna buy you. Like that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And it doesn't make sense for SGC to put forth the effort they've put into to like grow the way they have to then just sell off. The only
Yeah.
thing it would really benefit them on would be the financial backing with Blackstone or whatever, but I still don't even know that selling off or selling out to one of the other companies would make sense for them. But he said, depending on what the price is, and if they would allow us to run the company the way we were still running it, I would sign the check. And I was like, hold on. Like, now, granted, he's not the owner, he's just the CEO.
Mhm.
But that was odd. That like I was surprised at that take. And I don't know if that was him he said things before, like, that he puts a little bit overboard when the way he says it. I don't know if he said that in jest of, well, if they're giving us, $1 billion or $100 million or whatever, I'd consider signing the check as long as we get to keep running the company. So I don't know if it was in that perspective that he intended it, or if he really meant if they're interested and we can still run the company the way that we're running it, that he would sign the check. So, that threw me for a loop too. Do you think we potentially does PSA buy Beckett and CSG or Certified Collectible Group buy SGC? And then we're
Yeah,
down to two umbrellas?
yeah. I truly believe that they all understand right now that either they align with others or start gobbling them up, because the space there's just the space is not big enough to handle
Well,
everyone. You
to
can't
also
handle all
point
those.
out to also point out with Jim Rate's numbers, the month of October, the number of cards versus from September to October, it actually increased by 1%. So
Hmm.
there was no fall off across the map on
Right.
graded cards. Like the demand is still there. I mean, I don't know what 1%. I don't know if he said uh no, it just said up slightly plus 1% compared to September. The only companies PSA dropped 3%. They went from 1.047, or they were 1.083 this month, they did 1.047. So, they dropped 36,000, I guess that is. But then Certified Collectible Group took 45,000 and increased between CSG and CGC. So they had a 49% growth. They're back almost to their August number, which was 171,000. This month they did 135. SGC, remember them back in July when they went from 100,000 to 54,000? What I was saying is, if you remember SGC when they went, from June to July, they were at 100K and they dipped to 54. Well, in October, they were back up to 81. That's their highest number since that June to
Yeah.
July dip. So the thing
Yeah. I
here,
remember that.
when we're looking at this and we can discuss and say, well, card prices are down, economy's down, all of this is down. And in your mind, you would want to say people are leaving the hobby, wax prices, all this other, mixed all together in the mixing bowl. You would expect these numbers to be dropping, but they're pretty well sustained across the board. You might get one company move up the ladder a little bit on their demand and another one dip off month to month. But overall, we're kind of seeing a sustainable demand. It's just different places each month. So um, I I want to say that they all four can stay active. It's just Beckett's really going to have to figure out what they need to do to keep themselves as, I guess, a contender. And I think the first and foremost thing that they're going to need to do is they're going to have to get better competitively with their pricing. I mean, they've always been like, even before CSG or whatever, when it was PSA SGC, those two guys were, you could do bulk for like $8 to $9. And then you had Beckett sitting there, what were they, 15, 20, $25 or something like that. Like, it was this much higher margin. And I think that really, which that was 4 years ago, 5 years ago, when PSA kind of started shifting and taking the demand away. Um, I think that's when they really started losing a lot of their interest, is when, the pricing was just so much different. Um, do you think
I mean,
by I mean, I don't know if you know any of the people even in there now because it's a whole new regime. So
no, I
you
don't.
didn't go
I
you
don't.
didn't go to
You
the
know,
summit itself, I don't think, did you?
no, I refused.
Okay.
I, I, I mean, I went. I made an appearance, but I didn't partake in all the rest of the stuff because it's, you know, I'm gonna say it in the crudest way. It's a circle jerk. That's all it is. And then I don't want to be any part of that. That's not me.
So, if you had to predict, how much longer do you think they can hold on? Or better yet, which
I mean,
we've already agreed Beckett is the one on the highest odds. How long? We'll just put them foremost. How long do you think they hold on?
I don't see them, by the national, by our next national, they're already acquired, in my opinion, because they have to align with somebody else. They're not Their brand no longer has value in the collector's mind. What do they truly have? When you're launching, throwing out their VHS grading as being your big niche, instead of rebranding your grading format itself and saying, hey, okay, let's change the case, let's do this, let's remove the stupid inner sleeve that everybody hates, let's drop the price. If we really want to be acquired, let's drop our price as low as we can and get a flood of product being thrown at us, and we have a ton of stuff here, and then this way our numbers look fantastic, and we can get a little bit more money for this company before we sign off on it on our way out. Because
I know they
if
recently
they
moved to a
don't,
new
I mean,
facility. Do you
yeah,
know if that facility was
yeah, that's great.
for capacity? Do you know if it was for capacity on the card grading, or was that because of the VHS involvement?
I don't know, because I don't have any privy information to that anymore. Most of my guys that were there, and including myself, we've all moved on. When Dr. Beckett left, a lot of people left. There's a big deal in this in the sports card hobby, that loyalty plays a big deal. When you're willing to work for a man for absolutely nothing, just because you believe in the magazine itself, and the pure joy that it brought people, that speaks loudly. And I can attest that nobody would work for that company for free and go out of their way for that company for free now. Not like they did before anyway.
So let's put this. Let's play a little. What if it happened? So here's the scenario. Let's say back when we were having fun, pretending to be Nat, Peter, whatever, and you mentioned Beckett or PSA buying Beckett, and then that gives
Mm,
them a central U.S. location. So then they have the East
yeah.
Coast, Central, and West Coast. That would make
Which
a
makes the
ton of
absolute
sense
sense.
to me. What's that?
Yeah, that's what I've said. That's what I've been saying. I've been saying that for over a
Well,
year.
let's take it even further than regional sensibility of it. So
Okay.
let's say PSA acquires them. Then you just wipe the Beckett name and you just brand it PSA. That would then put PSA having VHS grading, which they currently don't have. They have the video game grading, but I don't believe WADA does VHS. So they would have VHS grading that would acquire them with CBCS, which then that would give PSA comic book grading. Let's keep in mind that Beckett has a marketplace that PSA could rebrand to be the PSA Marketplace. There's a lot of moving pieces here that by acquiring Beckett as a whole source would open up even more lanes for them PSA to be involved in. And then you have this battle with CCG, who has, they started doing video games. They have comics. They have, all of the other grading stuff. They have the coins, currency, everything else. Um, you would basically have two large corporate umbrellas that are doing various things. And I think that would actually be kind of healthy. But the question mark then is, where does SGC go? Like, because they're still, it's amazing to me of how reputable they are. They've sustained for 20 plus years. They're very respected in vintage of all things, which is like the toughest market really. but yet they don't have that backing. They don't have the other areas to fall back on. I was discussing it today. It's always scared me with them. Um, when people ask questions, hypothetically, if one of the companies do go, I've looked at SGC's numbers and I'm like, well, they don't really get a lot of TCG volume. And that is something that I've been high on, thinking that the demand for that will continuously increase. So they've always had this, like, I've wondered, um, where where the sustainability would come from. Like, if sports cards fall down, SGC doesn't have anything to fall back on, and they don't have the financial backing. So, um, do you think if that scenario, and again, this is all hypothetically, do you think if that scenario, then SGC winds up selling as well? Or do you think they still try to come, you know, combat the two? At that point, it would be two giants, to sustain in their space. I mean, it's crazy to think about that there could be two corporate giants in the grading space. I was just saying, so let's hypothetically say that PSA acquires Beckett and, they
Yep.
brand everything to PSA. PSA has all these new grading, options with the comics and the VHS, and they have a marketplace. And then you have Certified Collectible Group. They do, comics and video games and all that stuff as well. So at that point, you have two big, giant umbrellas in the grading world. Where
Yep.
does that then leave SGC? Do they keep battling as the little, I don't want to call them an underdog, because like they've grown and cemented their place. They've held on, second longest company between the one, between PSA and Beckett. They're the second longest tenured. Um, but do they continue fighting if it blossoms into two corporate giants, or do they say, okay, we want to be bought as well?
Yeah, I truly think SGC should just stay on their own. Either that or make a play, for something else. But if I was SGC, I would say, okay, look, I don't have the capital to acquire, Beckett, and I'm not going to align with Beckett because one, I don't have the capital to do so, and two, I don't have the staff that I can transfer over to the Beckett side to say, okay, hey, look, we're going to take X amount of you guys are going this way because we need, more bodies over there and we need to make some changes. It just wouldn't make sense. I would be okay with SGC just being SGC. Just do your thing, keep doing what you're doing, and just keep
That's
bringing the prices down. And if they do that, they can be easily a number two without a doubt because everyone is always going to look for a second option, no matter what.
well,
Competition is good.
wait,
So
wait. So you say number two, but let's be
yeah,
clear. That would be in sports cards.
yeah, right,
Okay. Because that's
correct.
something that I think people are also losing sight of. Because
Mhm.
many many of the content creation, and the topics getting thrown, like, I think sports cards talk about grading more than anything, any other entity or genre out there. I think sports cards is the main leader segment that talks grading all the time. But the reality is, some of these companies are actually propped by TCG right now. PSA, let's see, for this month, their number one uh, category was TCG. 290,000 TCG cards out of, what was it? So about a third, almost nearly a third of their production this month was TCG, and that's been a trending thing. CGC did 199,000 out of 135,000 cards, so that's something to keep in mind. And SGC, they are already number two in sports. Like, the numbers went 716 for PSA. SGC was at 76,000. So the next closest was CSG at 36,000. So SGC has a clear spot as the number 2 in sports. And
Right. And that's where they want to be. That's where they want to be. Truthfully, they're not going to admit that, but that's where they want to be. Because they understand where they're at. Not having that capital behind you plays a big part in this, in the whole factor of any type of acquisition, any type of alignment. Because what are your assets? What do you bring to another company? Because nobody's going to just align with you because you're Joe Blow. And hey, I like Joe Blow, so I'm going to align with Joe Blow. It doesn't make financial sense. It just doesn't happen. So
yeah,
it's all about.
I think that's kind of what they've done is they've realized, look, we can do sports cards. We've got the sports card people, we've got their support now. We got the vintage crowd. We've got the ultra modern people. Let's just continue doing what we're good at. Because I mean, realistically, they only did 4,000 TCG. That
Mhm.
was 5 times less than Beckett, who was at 20,000,
Yeah.
and it was 25 times less essentially than CGC, who did 100,000 or
Yeah.
99,000. So
I mean, don't
uh,
get me wrong. I'm sure they would want to do more, but that's natural. Of course, you're a company. You want a little bit of growth, and you would love to have growth in every space. But don't shoot yourself in the foot because you're trying to grow in a space that you're not strong in. Stick to what you're strong with. If you're
right,
strong in one
exactly.
area,
It's
stay
just
there.
It's just curious because I think sometimes these numbers, like you hear some of the content creators throwing out the numbers and everything, and they're looking at and they're like, oh my God, PSA did, 1 million cards. That can't be real or whatever. Well, yeah, it can because they are doing more than just sports cards. Like
Yep.
TCG
Right.
has it's blossomed a lot as well, and it's propping a lot of these companies up, and it's really, I think, a space that's going to continue growing further. So that's why it's kind of it's a weird area. Like, I like that SGC knows what they're good at, and I like that they've continued to focus and grow in sports card grading. But then there's this concern because if sports cards do, dip even further or people leave more, that's taking their lifeline away, right? It's
Mhm.
almost like if you're only good at one thing and that one thing starts slimming, then you're going to slim with it, you know?
Mhm. Sure.
So that is a concern in this space because let's face it, PSA is more than even just card grading. They have, WADA and they have the currency and
Coins.
all that stuff. And,
Right. Yeah.
um, same with even we're sitting there talking about Beckett. We don't know what they did. Maybe the VHS grading is booming and they're getting massive money, and that's why they dipped down on cards because they were so busy in VHS grading. They had to run over there and get some, movies slabbed up or something. They had to. I
Okay.
don't know. I'm just hypothetically speaking here,
It's your
but
stretch, but okay.
it is a stretch. I mean, I do know that CSG and CGC, I do know they share staff on the back end of things. So their
Mhm.
numbers do get kind of, you might see a strong day for one day, and the next day it might be low and swapped or whatever because they share staff there. So, so it could happen with Beckett. I'm trying to throw them a bone here.
Yeah.
Maybe they were getting the VHSs booming. I don't know.
Maybe you need
Um,
to throw a rock through their window to wake them up because
Hey,
they're gonna.
let's not joke about that because we'll roll into a next topic here. I don't know if you heard, and it's not big news or major news, but it's fishy news. There was a grading company that got robbed
Yeah.
and cards were stolen.
Yeah. I saw that.
It sounds a bit fishy to me because again, we're not here to, as the phrase goes, poo poo on anyone. However, I do not know I don't know of anyone that I've ever spoken to in this hobby that would come out and tell me, yeah, I'm going to send my 86 Fleer Jordan to FCG.
Yeah.
That just, I don't know of anybody that would be their first choice. Beckett, maybe. SGC, maybe. PSA, obviously, people would say that. CSG, they're moving up the ranks. You know, they've been slapping some big boy cards, so they might would do a Jordan. FCG, something isn't adding up here, especially if it's a legitimate Jordan. And then the fact that the owner, I guess, was saying, "Hey, we really don't want this out there because we're hoping the person tries." How do you know if they're selling the cards? I mean,
Right.
where
He
that was
just
the dumbest statement I've ever
yeah.
heard.
Yeah,
I
he just
mean,
didn't want the bad publicity, you know. I mean, if you're a grading company, first of all, your stuff should have been locked up. I mean, none of that stuff should have been out there exposed to someone's hands, easily accessible. So,
if
I
you're a
mean,
grading company, don't you have security cameras that you want people sharing the footage of so you
sure,
can possibly identify who the person is, whether
yeah,
or not he sells these cards that you're not going to be able to identify?
yeah, yeah, I would think so. I mean,
I mean,
I know people that that are not grading companies that have 500, 1,500 pound safes in their homes, and they still put a camera on the damn thing, like someone's going to put it on their back and walk away with it.
uh,
It's crazy. So if somebody personally would do that, why wouldn't you do that to protect your financial interests as your business? I mean,
right,
that's a
right, yeah.
major liability with your insurance. Insurance isn't going to cover any of that. They're
I'll
going to
I'll
say, hey,
tell you,
you were negligent.
I'll come right out and say my thoughts on the whole thing. I think they were holding on, and I'll be honest, I like somebody shared the poll in a Discord, like showed it, and my first thought was HGA. That was my first one, and the reason was because I know they're located in Tennessee, and I know the Nashville show was just going on or whatever, and I was like, they've been hanging on, and that would just be too easy. Like the show was there, whatever. But then they were kind of another option for me, the FCG thing. I'm wondering, and again, I don't know, right? I don't know any further details than anybody else does, but I'm wondering the legitimacy to this to begin with. I'm wondering if this wasn't a fact of, okay, it's November 1st. We're struggling to pay our rent. Um, you don't see many of their slabs anywhere out there. And if this was one of those things, well, hey, we had an 86 Fleer Jordan, we had this, and this, and it all got stolen, and we need to file an insurance claim. And it wouldn't be hard for one of these companies to pop some orders in the system and be like, yeah, it was this order got stolen, this order got stolen. How is anybody going to ever like prove that they weren't there? I mean, you can't
Mhm.
prove that they were, but you can't prove that they weren't either. So it's kind of got me thinking that it smells a little funny to me. But anyway, just toss that out there a minute. But what do you think of the price changes? Do you think PSA stays at 15? Do you think they go back to the 18? Do you think maybe they go lower? Um, CSG extended their discount thing through the end of the year now. Um, SGC hasn't made any further, and then Beckett, I'll be honest, I don't even know what they're priced at right now. I know they had a special going on, but I I don't know what they're currently at. So
I
where do
mean,
you
if
think we see prices leading into the final 2 months of the year?
well, I believe they're still going to do another special. I believe they'll do like a Christmas special and maybe drop it down to 13, or even $12, just for the heck of it. Personally, if it was me, I'd do a $10 special just to get loaded up all over again, and then this way, coming into the new year, I have more than enough inventory to keep my staff, busy and keep everybody employed.
Well, the 15 right now, and I don't
I
know
mean,
if it's being reiterated very
it,
well. It's only a
it
special. It's not a permanent change.
correct.
It
Yeah.
was a special.
Yeah. Yeah, but still, it's 15 is their target number, and really the hobby wants a $10, a $10 grade, 10 to 12 bucks is where the hobby would be comfortable at. They want to be at 15. They want to get that 2-for-1 style, money on the grade, you know, and the common person, by the time we're paying insurance, shipping, and everything else, we want it to be around 10 to 12 bucks, especially for the set registry, because we're still on the outside looking in as far as the set registry goes.
I having conversations with Carlos, I actually think he has a great point on it. Um, I think at the $200, I think it is declared value,
Yeah, it's
being at
ridiculous.
like a $15 or $18 price point, I can see that being okay. But having that $200 declared value, it still opens the gate for them to do something like a $10 special, but with that $99 declared value. Because I think many
Mhm.
folks either weren't in the hobby or, forget because of all the craziness of everything that went on. Before the pandemic, the bulk pricing, the declared value was $99. That was the max
Yep.
declared value. So it was like $8 for $99 declared value. So um, that then
Yep.
could easily get you back into your set registry folks and offer them a discounted price, but just, you know, they have the declared value thing is
Right.
it's a fickle beast
Y-
because you either love it or you hate it, but it does allow them to work pricing on two different levels. Like they really could open up another level that's cheaper by using the declared value as the stipulation of it. So
mhm.
that would be
Yeah, that's
interesting to
it.
see. Like maybe
That
go ahead.
that would be true. And I agree with you. That would be true. But for set registry people, like I said, we've still been on the outside looking in, and you, you would think we're the easiest people to please. Just give us a number. We just want to be able to submit our stuff. When it gets done, send it back to me. We're not worried about the time. We just want to get our stuff slabbed. So we're trying to build sets. It's real simple. Put that cheap price out there for us and get socked within that. That they're not. You hear me?
You were cutting in and out for a minute. I
I cut
agree.
it in and out on you again.
I agree that the registry. That's a tough one. Like I want to say people that are doing the registry stuff and collecting that they're not as picky on the turnaround, but at the same time, I also think that there is a there's a point that it becomes excessive. So I think if they said 6 months, people might be okay. But I think you also have to wonder how many people remembered when they were like, oh, yeah, 3 to 6 months before, and it turned into that 18 month. So
Hmm.
PSA is going to have to prove themselves. Even, they're going to need to get the pricing down, but I think they're also going to have to prove themselves to people that that was a screw up. That was a let's take as much as we can get in house, but whatever scenario you want to look at it as. But we knew we couldn't do that. We knew we couldn't do 12 million cards. We weren't expecting 12 million. You also have to think that was pandemic, right? And
Sure.
I also think currently, even though there's more wax being produced, I don't know that as much wax is being opened as there was then. So that might limit some of the nonsense. You got people that sent stuff and then realized this was stupid of me to send it. They lost money even on the grading fees after it was all said and done. So maybe they've learned a bit and they won't just go pick everything out of their old shoebox and send it in. Um, so I think there's been a lot of scenarios that have maybe changed what the landscape would be, and maybe they're just being cautious and they're easing in and they want to see what they can sustain capacity at, what they can like what their numbers are looking like before they just say, okay, fine, we're gonna do this $8 a card again and have at it. So maybe they're also trying to wean Beckett down to get them at a lower price so they can buy them like you claim.
Yeah, I mean, look, if if you want to acquire Beckett, all you got to do is give them a call
Just keep
because
squeezing the turnip.
yeah, because they're garbage. I mean, and it's bad. Because I love the company, and I'm a PSA guy, and I love Beckett, because I have history there, and it upsets me that they allowed this to happen and basically, sat on their butts and did absolutely nothing and hurt their brand so bad that, like I said, to me, it was only a matter of time before someone like me is coming to knock on their door and with that little bank notice saying, "Hey, you're being liquidated. You now are getting called out. Your creditors are coming to collect because you have done nothing."
You know the,
And
the the beautiful thing with this podcast, and I don't know if folks or the listeners have realized this yet. And if you've made it this far, we appreciate you guys. But I hope you guys have realized he just said he loves Beckett, but he's a PSA guy. And I'm sitting over here on the other side of the microphone as the guy that sends to SGC and have recently submitted and has another submission ready for CSG. So you're getting like the best of all four companies here, but two different, completely separate opinions when it comes to grading and, graded cards and all of that thing, because he's more Beckett and PSA, and I'm SGC and CSG. So this is
yeah,
actually a
but
beautiful little mesh here that people can see. We're
yeah,
giving you
but
both
for
sides of the opinion.
sure, but it's so personal to me because it holds Dr. Beckett's name, and that really upsets me. You know what I mean? Yeah, he sold the company and he was paid and he sold the name and everything else, but that's still your name, man. And
Oh yeah.
when people sit there and think about that, what this company has done, that's just wrong. It's just wrong in so many in so many ways. I mean, you've basically just taken food out of everyone's mouth that works there, and then you've basically ruined a good man's name right now. That's why I said that company has to be acquired and needs to be acquired by another major player. And I said PSA, of course, because that would put PSA as an extreme piece, a regional grading company. You could you could dictate where all the grading is submitted to as to where you're located and streamline grading, and it would make perfect sense. You would you would just you would kill the grading landscape altogether. You would basically force all these other smaller companies either to jump ship and just say, hey, we're out of this, we can't compete, or we need to all align together and get under one umbrella and try and fight for a little piece of the pie, because that's why I said it's just not going to happen. And, PSA is not going to get knocked off of that totem pole because everybody always looks at resale value. That's what everybody is so hyper focused on. So
And
that's
see,
that's why PSA is where they are.
that's where I separate myself and I laugh because when I'm talking about, I do SGC, CSG. I'm not gonna sit here and say I don't buy Beckett or PSA. I don't hate those companies at all.
Of
Um,
course you don't, because
but
there's
on the
cards. You love the cards. You may not love
right,
the
right.
case, but you're gonna love the cards.
The reason I use the companies I do has solely been based on price point on my end, not the resale end.
Hmm.
It's like the cost to grade, and then coupled with the customer service. I'm not 100% familiar yet. So far, I don't have anything bad to say. So far, CSG, now this is still new in the process, but so far they've been good. SGC has been phenomenal on the customer service side. I've never used Beckett, and if anybody from Beckett ever listens to this, I'll tell you the one reason I have never used Beckett, and it's solely the price. I the price has always, ever since I started grading cards, the price to grade with Beckett has always been too much, and I just
Yeah,
I
it
look
does.
at that.
Price
That's important to me.
pricing sucks. Customer service sucks. You
I
know
can't speak on that. I've never dealt with it, but the
yeah,
price has
it's
always been the turnoff. And
well,
I don't care as
again,
much. I know some
go ahead.
people like it, but I'm not a huge fan of the slab.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
I don't mind it. It is bulky and but I don't like the inner sleeve. The inner sleeve has done more damage to cards, even though they say they don't. And I have plenty of slabs here that have cards in them where that slab it just looks like crap with that sleeve in there because they've sealed it too tight or whatever, and it's caused any type of, because I have some Cuban Deportes cards, so some old Cuban stuff, which is wafer thin because they were made to be thrown into sticker albums. And I have some old Mexican Mexicali League cards, from the 50s and 60s, and they're in Beckett slabs. But that inner sleeve, when by the time you put that little stupid thing inside of an inner sleeve and they seal it, it just creates, it looks like a wave in in the paper, and it just looks terrible. If it's not a good heavy cardboard stock, it's basically ruining the card on the inside. And I've asked, I'm like, can you not put the stupid sleeve on the inside? Just leave the card inside. No, we this is what we have to do. We have to do it this way. Okay, well that's fine. Do it that way, and then I no longer send you any of the paper thin Cuban cards any longer to you. So,
I I uh I used CSG with my mantle and Jackie Robinson specifically because of the sleeve too,
mhm.
because I think it takes away from the appearance of the card, like the color and everything.
Yeah, it does.
Um, and even though CSG put it in a sleeve, um, it's not like, I don't know. The sleeves that Beckett used are like foggy.
Yeah,
I
they're
don't know.
like
I don't know how to describe it. I just think it takes away from the color and the appearance
you know
of
what
the
I call
card.
them? I call them little frosties because it looks like a frost,
Yeah,
on the stupid thing. It's terrible. It's not good.
yeah. I don't care for them either. You mentioned the little companies, and there's several of those out there, but there's one. Um, I've done a couple videos on them recently. I don't know if you've listened to them or if you've had the chance, but there's one that is intriguing that I wonder if somebody eventually buys out because of the robotic or machine grading or whatever. Um, but they're one that I guess they have a lot of financial backing. I don't know the full story or details to them, but that would be Tag, and we've discussed them on here before. Do you think PSA or one of the main companies goes and acquires them as well, or do you think any of these moves, hypothetically or just in general, that we see happening with the pricing and all of that, is going to put even more and more pressure on like a company such as them, even though they have like this great tech and on paper it sounds amazing and all this, because I've been keeping up with their numbers a bit. Their pop report is super easy to pull up and look at how many cards they've graded. They're really only doing 40 cards a day. I don't even know how in the hell they're keeping employees busy doing only 40 cards a day.
Because they're sitting online arguing with everybody else, sitting there saying that they're a great company. That's what they're doing.
I mean, I don't know who the people are that's commenting, but when I look at that, I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, if they work 8-hour shifts, that's 5 cards an hour. And a human doesn't have to grade it. Like, you put it in the machine, and they showed the process. It's literally sliding the card in the machine, and it puts the report. The report card is all done, digitally on a software element.
Which is programmed by a human being, so it's biased. It's
Well,
just
I'm
I
not,
don't
I'm not getting into that aspect. I'm talking about the workflow of it all.
yeah.
Like the computer grading, there's one thing,
Uh,
whether you argue whether it's
uh,
accurate, inaccurate, whatever, there's one thing you
I
can do, and that's speed up the process. And they're doing like 40 cards a day. I am
I
shocked by that.
I
I didn't catch that. You broke up.
mhm.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I didn't catch what you
Actually,
said.
oh, I said, I guess they're making big money, right? And
I
I'm not a fan of them. I'm really not. So I'd rather not poo poo on them. So I'm just gonna say I'm not a fan of them.
Well,
They're
I
that
want that wasn't the purpose of this. The purpose was to throw the numbers out there and to show, like, if PSA continues on a downward motion, or even if CSG, continues to take some of the space with, sports cards or whatever, and then SGC continues their strength. I mean, they had a 17% growth in October. There's not, like, if they're all $18 and under on grading right now, and tag is, I think their cheapest is $22, there's not going to be much demand or like use of them, so to speak, if they're more. I just don't see people sending them stuff at a higher price. I mean, we've been waiting for grading to come down in price. If they're now back up, like, above everybody else, who's sending them stuff? And how can you be sustainable as a brand new company with all of this money invested in technology and everything else and branding, and they're sponsoring all these shows and all this other stuff? How can you be profitable? They have to be doing this to try to be acquired. That's the only thing I can see as an end goal, because I don't see how they could be competitive in the space starting off and doing 40 cards a day. I
at,
mean, at
and not at their
$22 a
and
card,
not at their
let's
price
say
point.
$25 a card, and 40 cards a day. What is that? $1,000?
1,000. Yeah.
How is that profitable? I mean, who's writing the paychecks here?
Yeah. I don't know. I, I'm gonna reserve my judgment. So it just I can't poo poo. I just can't. I want to, but I can't.
Yeah, and that's not the purpose of this. I was just wondering your thoughts on if
No,
anybody
and
would
it's
be
not. And
acquiring them.
I no, I understand what you're saying. And yes, it's basically yes, build your brand up to be to be acquired by somebody else. Make your chunk of change, hit and run, and move on to the next thing. You know that. I, I mean, there's people there within that company that were doing other things, and they jump ship from another company to move to this company. That's what I said. It's all about hitting and running. There is nobody has that sustainability of long term, and it's just like our hobby. Everybody wants to hit and run and make that quick buck and turn and move on to the next thing instead of, playing the slow game and making that money through the long haul. People are just
Well, you say that, and it's funny. I did a CSG preview video on the first batch that I sent out. That's like my worst ratio on likes to dislikes, and I
oh
don't know
really?
why. I don't know what I did in it. I thought I was showing some cool griffies, and you know, I look at myself as being someone that has been like straightforward with everything I've said. I don't know of anything that I've been like contradicting on, where I've contradicted myself. I don't know too many times that I've been hypocritical. I've kind of stuck to what I've said, whether the boom was just starting or it was on the down path. Um, and I've stayed, using the same company, supporting the same company, SGC, and I'm still, sending cards to SGC. So it like shocked me, I guess, and I started questioning like, why would people even download this? Like, are people mad because I'm using a different company? Because after 3 years or whatever it's been now, I decided to use a different company for some of my stuff solely, as I just stated a little bit ago, because the cost of the grading right now makes sense. Like, if I'm
And
saving
it's
several dollars a card, I'm kind of dumb not to. It's my PC stuff and everything. Like,
right.
why wouldn't I? Right?
Sure.
I mean,
Right. Absolutely. Because you're able to grade more.
right. Yeah.
It's just, I don't know. People are funny because they think that you have to stay in this hobby. People think that okay, you only have to play under one roof as your grading company, and you don't. Because I have a ton of slabs. You've seen a lot of those garbage slabs that I have that popped up there. Over 20 plus years of grading companies that have been out there. I've never cracked the stupid cards out of the cases. I left them in there. I bought the card. It's what I wanted was the card. And I cared less about the case. It just happened to be in a case, so it added extra protection to it. Big deal. But
Right.
again,
Right.
all
And
those
and the
all those
way
fly by night companies then are no different than they are now. It's the exact same thing.
well, and the way I see it, like I have so many raw cards that I like graded cards in my collection now. Is it silly to slab them all? Do they need to all be slabbed? No, no, definitely not. But it's nice to, for presentation or, you know, eh, protection, that sort of thing. And if it's only going to be, you know, a few bucks more than a one touch or what have you, then I'm cool with doing it. But at the same token, if I can save, let's just even, and I'm just throwing these numbers out as an example, but let's say I over a course of 100 cards, I save $3 a card. That's $300.
Yeah.
You know, that's a lot of money. You do that over, 500 cards, you're at $1,500.
Sure.
So the savings add up, and people, I've
It just
always been this way. Like, even when I started with SGC, when I was even, selling the graded cards, that was more of what I was grading them for. I would, keep some to add to the collection, but majority of the portion was going to sell to recoup, the fees to send more in and to keep recycling that process. And people kept wanting to, tell me, oh, you're silly because this one sells for more and this one sells for more. And yeah, I get that. I get that. But at the end of the day, I've always looked at it as, if I can save money on the front end, then what I'm making on the back end isn't as important. Like, eventually things stack up in a similar fashion.
yeah.
And
It all balances
that's
out. It always does.
yeah, and that's just how I've like went with it. I've done my own thing. I've listened to the noise and the nonsense and just went with what I enjoy, what's made me happy, you know, and it's worked. But I don't know, like that. I just threw that out there because it was funny to me. I was looking at my like the percentages of my likes and dislikes, and I seen one, and it was like at 80 some percent, and I was like, "What the hell did I do in this video?" I looked at it, and it was my CSG preview, and I'm like, "What did I do?" Like, I was showing cards. So
Yeah.
it's funny, how you say that people, get into stuff and then leave it or what have you. I guess maybe people thought, "Oh, he's jumping ship," and I'm not jumping ship. It's okay to use multiple companies. Many people do it out there. I
Yep.
am trying to experiment with that right now. I do have another batch ready that I will be shipping out. Again, the price point just makes too much sense. The slab is amazing. And I want to see like how their grading is. I want to see how the turnaround times, the process. I want to see how the service is. So, if I'm sending out some fun stuff for my collection, this next order I have here, some of it is going to be sent to sell, so I can kind of see how the resale is on certain things. So be it. I'm having fun. So, but anyway, I think it's been a good conversation. We could talk grading for years, and I don't think the conversation would ever end because just so much to talk about with it. It's always a moving component of the hobby. Uh, you never know what's going to happen next with it. Um, so, at the end of this conversation, to review our thoughts and to put a stamp on it, we're saying and predicting that Beckett is the highest odds to either exclude themselves from the grading game, but more likely PSA to acquire them. Is that what we're going with?
I mean, personally, if I was PSA, that's where I would be at.
Well, yeah,
No
that's what I'm
doubt.
saying. Like, we're not saying that's going to
Yeah.
actually happen. We're saying if we had to go to Vegas right now, hit up a bookie, and that this there was like, this was on the sheet, the betting sheet, we would put our money to say that likely Beckett gets acquired.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Without a doubt. Yeah. Because I mean, in my professional background, I've just seen it way too many times. I've seen what a company does when they get desperate to try to be financially fiscal and say, hey, okay, we're going to do this because we're going to make a lot more money doing this, and they veer left and then they veer right and then they run right into that pole, and that pole is the creditors coming and knocking on their door. So,
One last take on
it's.
this.
Mhm.
One last take before we close this out. If it happens, would this be one of the, I don't want to call it necessarily a collapse. Would it be one of the biggest changes ever to happen in the hobby where Beckett goes from essentially number one and most known name of the grading companies to potentially acquired and non-existent?
Yeah, that's a big deal, man. It really is a big deal. But in order for that company to survive and to be who they are, and to come back to have some respectability, it's not going to be done with some tech guys and you need guys that are already entrenched in this hobby, and that's where these companies are failing. They're not they're thinking of their bottom line and thinking they can save their bottom line instead of falling on the sword and going out there and getting the right guys. And you don't even have to pay them that corporate money. There's guys that will do this job, man, for pennies on the dollar because they love the hobby and they would love to work in the hobby and they have that experience, but they don't look at it that way. It's all about that small little circle that they keep, and they just keep bringing in the same old type. I don't know. I,
Is that so they can control some things behind the scenes that they don't want exposed about the way certain things are done?
I,
Is that
I
some
mean,
of it?
yeah, but I mean, look, I'm going to give you an example. If if they were to, let's just say, and this is not what I want because I would say no. If they came to me and said, "Hey, Alex, look, we need you to come in. We need you to be the voice and be non-biased, and whether it's good or bad, give it to us the way it is, and we're not going to kick you in the teeth. We want to hear it straight how it how it really is, and what the hobby really wants, and allow me to go out like I used to go out all the time and engage with everybody and get all that information and then bring it back to the house, and then it was put to good use. That's the way it used to be done. That's why Beckett was so strong, because that was such a tight knit. It's no longer that. It's all about that corporate dollar, and that's where a lot of these companies fail, because the hobby is not a corporate. It's just not a corporate sense. Where it doesn't make corporate sense in the mindset of the basic collector, and the basic collector is the one that runs this hobby. No matter what anybody says to you, that's where the dollars are at, because we're always going to buy junk, whether it's good or bad, because we love the hobby.
Right. Yeah, it's just like, I mean, in that aspect of it, that's 100% true because you can go back to like vintage cards and stuff that people know is in a sense, and I don't want to like put this out there in any kind of like financial way, but vintage is more of the safe money in the hobby, and we know that. But the reason that people feel comfortable saying that is because we know that it's not rare, but we also know that most of it is stashed away in collections.
Yeah. It's
And
it's not overproduced. It's not being thrown out everywhere where everybody can find it every day. And a lot of it's, well, I shouldn't say that. A lot of it's already slabbed. That's out there. There are still collections to be found, but not like they used to be 20 years ago. 20 years ago, you'd be able to find a collection every other week. Now it's just not happening. I know
right,
everything that I find
but
is modern garbage.
the point to it is the reason is because even let's say there's 100,000, of these vintage cards printed or more.
Hmm.
The key to it is they're always like wanted, and the majority of that is stashed in collections. They're not constantly, buy it today, sell it next week,
Yep.
buy it in the off season, sell it at the beginning of the season. That stuff is like stashed and appreciated.
Yep.
And until it recirculates into the marketplace, there's no the supply is limited, even if the production number is higher than expected, right?
Sure.
It's the same way with like the Griffey. We've had that discussion before. Yeah,
Yep.
the PSA 10 89 Upper Deck Griffey isn't rare by no means, but when you go to find them, there's not thousands of them readily for sale. That's
Right.
why it's able to sustain a pretty high value. So,
Yeah. Because everybody wants it in their collection, and that's where it's going to stay until they
right.
until they
It
until they
has a
pass
meaning.
on. Yeah, it does.
So, all right. Well, I think we'll cut it there. It's been a good conversation for a Wednesday. Hopefully, it helps people get through Hump Day and see what we have in store for the rest of the week. Today was a pretty busy day with pricing changes and all that stuff. So we'll have to see what Friday has in store for us. But as always, everybody, all you listeners, we do appreciate it, and we always like to end with a big thank you.
Thank you, everyone.